Good evening and welcome to the August 17th regular Board of Education meeting. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Here.
Mrs. Mooring? Mrs. Coates?
Here.
Mrs. Horn?
Here.
Mr. Manley?
Here.
Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Is there a motion to approve minutes from the July 6th Special Board of Education meeting, the July 18th Finance and Facility Committee meeting, and the July 20th regular board meeting?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Is there a second?
A second.
Thanks, Mrs. Coates. I wonder if it's the mics on that. Any corrections at all to the minutes? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Mooring? Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn? Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, so I've learned that procedurally, I've been doing this wrong when we have additions or corrections to the minutes. I think what I need to do procedurally first is get a motion on the table to approve the agenda, and then if somebody wants to make a motion to amend, but I have been doing it in a different order. So I'm looking at you because I know I'm about to throw you off.
That's okay.
So the first thing that I need is a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Horn. Oh, am I not connecting at all? I think you guys can hear me, but nobody online could. So there's a motion and a second, and now I think there are some recommended changes to tonight's agenda. I believe there might be 3 recommended changes. So let's, I guess, talk through what those recommendations are, and then if somebody would like to make a motion to amend the agenda, then we'll do that.
I have 2 of those 3
Yep.
changes. The first one is letter H, number 5. For St. Matt's, the budget source should read auxiliary, not general fund. Let me know when I can move forward.
And that's
Scott,
that's
no,
fund, that's Fund
Scott.
401. I'll put that in there as well.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
The second is letter I, number 53. Please remove the request for unpaid leave entirely.
Okay.
Letter I, number 53.
And then the modification that I am suggesting that we make to the end of the agenda, add a motion that we go into executive session pursuant to revised code 12122G1 for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, compensation of an employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints. So those are 3 recommended changes to tonight's agenda. Is there anyone who is willing to make a motion to amend the agenda with the 3 recommended changes that were just described? So to H5, to I-53, and then to add a motion to go into executive session? Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. I think you need to call the roll on the motion to amend, and then we can do a second roll call on the amended.
Correct.
Thank you.
First one, we'll go Mrs. Coates. Mrs. Horn? Mr. Manley? Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring? That motion carried.
Okay, so now Mr. Gooding is going to do a roll call vote on the.
Yep. And I'll do that in the same order. Okay. Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley? Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring? Motion carried.
Okay, so now we have the agenda as amended for tonight, and we are, I think, hopefully done with some of the procedural things, and we can move into the best part of our agenda, which is the school communities reports and presentations. And before we do that, I just want to say welcome back to school to kids today. And I know staff has been back Monday, and some since way before Monday, some never left. But the bulk of the staff started back on Monday. Our kiddos, all of our kids came back into buildings today. So happy first day of school. We are going to start with our Gahanna Jefferson Education Association president, Mrs. Miller. And you don't need to adjust the microphone. I know you know that.
Welcome to another year. Happy to be back. I just wanted to start by saying thank you for the virtual convocation. It was a little weird. It was odd. I shouldn't say weird. It was odd not to be together because it's fun to kick off, but the lack of parking and the stress it created for people when we tried to gather last year was really hard. So I think it was a nice, positive environment for everyone to start in their home buildings. We would also applaud GJA supports and applauds the renewed focus on safety. It's not fun stuff to talk about. It's not something we want to think about, but obviously keeping our kids and our staff safe is our number one priority in buildings. So we appreciate the district making that a goal for all of us. I wanted to shout out our middle school East staff. Who have been very flexible this last week, trying to get into their spaces and then welcoming kids today. And I know that for a lot of them it wasn't perfect. It's still not, but again, it's, we have to look at the goal in the future, which is these beautiful spaces for everyone. So definitely a shout out to that staff. We welcome 68 new members to our organization when we met with new teachers. I think there's still a few hires going on, so maybe we'll add even more. But we were happy that all of our new teachers that we've met with have decided to join GJEA, which maintains our 98% membership rate. Over the summer, we were all very busy. GJA had a few meetings. We had 4 members attend NEA, which is our largest representative assembly. This year it was in Orlando. Dwayne Marshall, Paige Harding, Dawn Stanforth, and Sarah Hansen all attended and came back with some new ideas and understanding of the direction for NEA this year. As we looked forward to this year, we have some things that we're really excited about in GJA. It just feels like every year that we get farther away from COVID, I don't even want to say it, it feels more normal and people are returning to a passion for joining and belonging and wanting to make things better. So it's really exciting for us. We are excited to continue to partner. Mrs. Elliott has been working with GJA and Mrs. Wigging and myself on some special ed pilot on workload calculator, which is a recommendation by ODE. So we had a very small group do it last year. We're going to open it up to a larger group to pilot this year, just so that we have a better understanding of what our special ed staff is dealing with. I am concerned every year. I feel like we lose a lot of special ed staff when we look at resignations over the last 2 years, and I think that they've had a really hard time. Pre-COVID, their jobs were not easy, but post-COVID especially. So we're hoping that with some of that, we can start having some discussions about ways to better support our special ed staff. We are continuing to work on some tweaks to the addendum schedule. I'm very excited. I was just typing it up. We've added some new positions, which we think will increase maybe some opportunities that we can give kids before and after school, and then making sure that it is profitable for teachers who have to give up their time to do that work. So we're very excited to be able to present that hopefully soon. And then I'm sure you all know it is a negotiating year. So we are super thrilled, though, that we left last year with dates on the calendar. In 23 years of being a Gahanna Jefferson teacher, I don't know that we have ever left knowing when we were going to negotiate. So that was a really big deal for us to know this is when we can target getting our proposal ready to meet with all of you. And we're excited for that round of negotiations. We will definitely be focusing on some special ed staff issues. Number of students per class, we're already a little worried about some elementaries. I'm sure that you all know, we think we know what the numbers are, and then the closer we get to school, it's like children come from everywhere. And I think we still deal with the fact that a lot of people, I don't know who in the state of Ohio, think we don't start school till after Labor Day. So it's really nice and quiet, and then it'll be after Labor Day, we'll get a whole bunch more kids. So we just want to make sure that our elementary, especially our primary classrooms, are not just inundated with a number of children. It's a lot for one teacher in a classroom. And then, of course, we're going to be, as we look to negotiating, talking to high school and middle school teachers about the number of classes they teach and the number of preps. I spoke with a high school math teacher this morning who has 5 preps. That's a lot for one teacher with over 160 kids on her caseload. So we're hoping that we can start having those conversations collaboratively and or at the negotiating table because we want to give the best experience to kids. And that just means allowing teachers to have that time with them. So we have a lot on tap for this year. We're excited to partner with everyone, and we wish everyone a great year.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here tonight after a really long weekend day. We appreciate it. Next, we've got from OPSI Local 249, Jerry Moore.
Good evening and welcome back. My talk, what I was going to do this evening, took a turn this afternoon. I was going to do one thing, and then I thought, you know what? Last year, as you recall, I introduced you to our drivers in kind of a cool little way with we range in age and we come from here and there. So I canvassed my drivers again this year, and I was going to do that. And the canvas information started coming back, and I was looking over it, and I'm like, this stuff is just boring. And so I thought, I'm not going to do that this year. So what I am going to do, though, is tell you that we showed up this morning. We were adequately staffed. We had a fantastic morning with, I'm going to say, very little to no drama this morning. This afternoon was good. Not as good as this morning, but it was good. And the difference is the parents are hands-on with the kids in the morning. They get them on the right bus. They get them at the right place at the right time. And in the afternoon, the kids are a little more on their own to find their bus and know what their stop is. And it doesn't always go quite as planned. So we have kids catch the wrong bus and miss their stop, fall asleep on the bus. So drivers get to the end of their route and look in the mirror, and there's still a kid back there, and they're like, so where do you live? And we'll figure it out. But so there was a little bit of drama this afternoon, but not a whole lot. So for the first day, I thought it went extremely well. And like I said, the staffing is so far so good. I don't want to jinx it, but we have pretty good staffing so far. So I know it's been difficult around the county, as the state, the country, but we're in a pretty good shape. It changes daily. So I ran into one of our drivers at the grocery store yesterday, and her arm was in a sling. And I'm like, so, not driving tomorrow? And so stuff happens, and just like that, you're down a driver. So you need to keep moving. We do have more drivers in the pipeline to be trained. Outside of that, it's a negotiating year for us too. So I've already talked to Tracy, and she has initiated the conversation about getting some dates on the calendar for us as well. So we look forward to that. We're excited about that. And that's really all I have. Great first day, and I'll see you again next month.
Thank you, Jerry. I didn't want to jinx it today either, but I looked down at my phone sometime in the afternoon, and I realized I hadn't heard anything from Dr. Deagle all morning, and I was hoping that it was because it was a quiet morning and not the opposite of that. So I'm glad that it was that we had all of our buses staffed and that things went well as they can be, can be expected.
It's amazing how well that works when it works the way it's supposed to.
Yes. So thank you to all of you. I think we are going to move on to board reports. And we will start with Finance and Facilities, Mrs. Mooring. And yes, please feel free to go.
So on Tuesday, the 15th, we had a Finance and Facilities meeting, and our normal Phase 2 construction project update. And Mr. Hetzel and Mike from Turner did an excellent job of bringing us up to date on what has already been completed, what is in process, and what's to come. So there's a lot of good pictures also. If you choose to watch that video, I think you'll love seeing the progress through those pictures and information. And then secondly, our Treasurer Gooding provided a update. It's not a whole lot of information because we've only got 1 month into our new fiscal year. So it was also a positive, higher revenue, lower expenses. We had a good conversation on that as well, and that was it.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. I have a really relatively short legislative update tonight. So we've already spent a lot of time talking about all of the changes that are in the budget. I think I shared with all of you my notes from the I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but the day-long seminar that OSBA, OASBO, and BASA does to go over the details of the budget. And I know Dr. Deagle shared with all of us a much longer analysis that our attorneys put together about all of the substantive changes in the budget. So I am not going, this will be the first night in a while that I haven't talked about the budget, so I'm not going to talk about the budget. The legislature is still on summer break. The next scheduled House and Senate sessions are not until September 13th. I'm sure committee work will get back going again before September 13th, but there are no dates on the calendar yet. There was one piece of legislation that was introduced, I think last week maybe, that is related to public education. It is a bipartisan bill. It's House Bill 250. It is a bill that would revise the graduation the requirements for the graduation seal for military enlistment. Currently, to earn that seal, I guess it doesn't account for students who may be appointed into a military academy or students who receive a scholarship to be in the reserves. So this piece of legislation would modify the requirements for that seal to allow those options to count for purposes of the seal. Because it's a bipartisan bill, and it doesn't sound like anything very controversial, it'll probably move, but we'll see. And then State Board of Education does not meet in August. Their next meeting is in September. Still kind of waiting to see how everything will be divided out between the new Department of Education and Workforce, the DO, and State Board of Education. So maybe in September that at their board meeting, it might be more clear. I don't know. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, I don't know what you all receive from OSBA and what you don't, but there was an update from OSBA about the final levy guidance from the auditor's office. That final guidance is still not available. So that's it from me as far as a legislative update goes. It looks like we have a report from Gahanna Parks and Rec from Mrs. Horn and a report from Insurance Committee from Mrs. Horn. So I will turn it over to you to do both.
Evening. I have just a quick update on Gahanna Parks and Rec. They had a meeting Monday night with the consultants that put together for Parks and Rec, and that was delivered Monday night at council. I believe they have an input, and then hopefully that will get voted on as part of the overall Monday plan for funds for that to be funded. So everything's kind of moving along with that, so that will hopefully be completed here shortly. And then insurance, just an update that we have our next quarterly meeting on Monday. So I'll have a better report out in September for that.
Thanks, Mrs. Horn. Then we've got a report out from Eastland Fairfield from Mr. Manley.
Thank you.
And okay, so the new superintendent at Eastland Fairfield, Shelley Groves, is going to be starting the new year, building and welcoming the students. And she's been attending the back to school events they've had for the satellite programs. And she's going to be visiting each of our 16 partner districts. The new theme is One Team, One Dream. And so over the summer, they were reviewing feedback from stakeholders and updating key actions to accomplish their pillars and their strategic plan. And then alongside Jennifer Blackstone, who's the new assistant superintendent, together they welcomed the new staff, and they have an internal mentor, and they also did training for IT, supporting and moving forward. The Ohio Association of Career and Technical Educators Summer Conference was attended, and so they attended and presented at that conference. Great times for career in tech. So Shelley did a presentation on using the student voice and choice to drive curriculum and develop opportunities. And admin did other ones, business partnerships and work-based learning, supporting special ed students in the lab, cohort approach to equity training, and with the student support system department. And then they had back to school night, which was a huge success, well attended. And let's see, August 22nd, they're going to have attendance at the state of Fairfield, the county address. And then just want to let you know that they launched a mobile app, streamlined to whatever people are wanting updates on. So they're really proud and excited about that. There's a fall bazaar coming up at Fairfield. Workplace learning is getting some promotion with that. And that's my report, so thank you.
You. Microphone's not working again, but we've got two reports from Mrs. Coates, one from Student Learning and Achievement, and then one from Deanna Jefferson.
I'm going to send you an article, and it has a research study as part of it that I thought was really interesting. That came from OSBA, Student Learning and Achievement, but it's about a school in Maryland that is using restorative justice practices and resolving conflicts and creating a healthier school environment. And it's not about not holding people accountable, but it's about helping our students learn to communicate better with each other, with texting replacing a lot of that one-to-one communication. This is where this kind of practice has been shown to be helpful. And the research article that came with it showed the positive impact it was having on students, from everything from academic achievement to reducing suspension rates and disparities, and substance abuse and student mental health challenges improving. So I thought it would be an interesting article to share with all of you. And then for the Gahanna Jefferson Education Foundation update. Good. So they have been super busy. They're closing this year's nominations for the GLHS Alumni Hall of Fame and Cornerstone Awards. We can go to gjef.org if we would like to submit a nomination, or anyone can. Many grant applications are open now, and staff members are able to apply online. And then they're collaborating with our community, including the Senior Center, to restart programming for students and senior citizens, and collaborating with teachers and our Director of Curriculum, Tia Holloman, to pick back up with workforce development. Thank you.
Did you cut me off? Oh, Ron has all the control back there. Okay, we are into the public participation section of the agenda. We don't have, so we will move into administrative reports, and I will turn it over to you, Dr. Deagle.
Evening. Thank you so much. It is good to be here with you this evening. We had a terrific day. Jill and I, my goodness, we put some miles on. Not as many steps as I thought we would, but we toured each one of our buildings today, and we just had so much fun seeing our students. It's really wonderful to do the work in the summer and then see our staff and our students appreciate that work, and then just be together. And we talked to many staff who said, we're so happy to be back and to be with our students. And that's just such a testament to the professionalism and the care that our teachers have for our students. So a wonderful first day. A few things that I'm looking forward to in the next week or so. On Friday evening, I'll be at Youth Center 254. Mr. Manley promised them that I would bring s'mores, so I will deliver on that, Mr. Manley. I'm just glad you didn't promise them pizza from across the street. So, yeah. So I look forward to that. And I heard that they have a few topics for me, so I'm enjoying sitting by the fire with them and talking to them. I'm also looking forward to September 7th and 8th. Our strategic plan development team is going to be meeting. We have 35 members, all stakeholder groups represented, and we are going to be working with our consulting team to start to take a rough draft to our strategic plan, and then send that out to others to just do some member checking and get some feedback. I'm also excited. Eric and I are going to meet with a retired educator group. You know that I meet with retired educators district-wide. I'm going to do that quarterly this year, but this is a group just for one building that meets monthly, and they invited us to join them for lunch next week, so I'm looking forward to that. And most importantly, this evening, well, most important, our students came back, and I got to see our staff as well. But second to that, I do want to publicly congratulate our president, Mrs. Burl Brown Pickle Antonio, for winning, being awarded OSBA's Aptitude Award. There are 3,400 board members in the state of Ohio, and President Brown Pickle Antonio is one of 35 to receive this award this year for outstanding boardsmanship and leadership. So congratulations, Madam President.
I'm going to just move on if you're done, Dr. Deagle, and turn it over to our treasurer, Mr. Gooding. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations. As Mrs. Mooring mentioned, we did have a great meeting on Tuesday night. We had some the Phase 2 report, but on the financial report, it wasn't as exciting as a construction update, but it was still good, relevant information that we had. It's always good that it's boring, that revenue's up and expenses are down. That's what we want to hear, especially when we look at the relationship to the 5-year forecast and the variances. Revenue was up 0.89%, and we underspent for the month of July by 0.63%. So that's great. It's just month one. We've got 11 more to go in the fiscal year. Highlights of the general fund were received just under $31.6 million in the month of July. Just under $29.9 million was for property tax advances, and we actually get the final settlement for those for the second half settlement tomorrow for the county auditor. Very appreciative that they got that done early. So we love having that money coming in our bank, and following up on that, earning interest. In July, it was a little different because we had interest that was posted in July from the previous year, for the previous month, for June, just because of the timing of when we had to close the books for the fiscal year end. So we did receive just under $393,000 that was posted to the books in July. $138,000 of that was from June, and then $255,000 was from July. Our state funding was just over $1.1 million. This number is going to change a little bit. This is where Burl did talk, we weren't going to talk about the state budget, but that's what's happening with this piece. With House Bill 33 now in place, it's being phased in over time, so there's some adjustments that are happening now. We have some adjustments that are happening in September, and then some final adjustments that are going to happen in October. All good. So everything's good, but we're working through that to figure out what the exact impact on us is going to be. So we're going to see this number fluctuate just a little bit over the next 3 months until we get those in place. ODE is working extremely hard on that for us. On the expense side, we spent $8.6 million in July. As I said, we were under budget by what we anticipated by 0.63%, so that was great. Ended a cash balance of just over $66.1 million for the general fund. PI fund, we had $2.1 million in revenue. All of it was our real estate property taxes for the most part. The interest earnings there were $635 from June that was posted, and then $10,700 that was posted from earned in July. We spent just over $842,000 on building projects throughout the district and ended with a cash balance of $5.5 million. On the construction fund, we received $3 million in revenue. This was big because this was all interest earnings, and it was a big one from June, and the timing of that, we had so many investments, just timing was bad. We had so many investments that came mature at the end of June, which isn't great for me because it's the end of the fiscal year, so it's just the timing of it. So we had $2.8 million that was earned in June, that was posted in July from fiscal year 2023, and then $882,000 that was actually earned in the month of July. You're going to see expenditures tick up in the construction fund because now out of that project, we're in the meat of it. We're moving ground, we're building, structures are coming up in the high school. That is the bulk of our project. So you're going to see those expenses tick up from what we've normally seen on a monthly basis. So we spent $3.3 million in July in the construction fund. We are currently sitting on a balance of $194.5 million in the construction fund. There are some items on the agenda for your approval tonight. We do have some appropriation changes here. We need to purchase some kitchen equipment, and that is being contributed through the food service fund. So we do have a cash balance, so we're increasing the appropriation, the budget there to contribute to that towards the high school construction project. We've got some special trust funds, the Central Office Sunshine Committee. These are dollars from staff that we do. Recognizing folks throughout the year. Some miscellaneous expenses in the high school athletic account to help get the stadium up and running with some miscellaneous supplies, things like that, to make it shine as the best as we can when we open that to the community. We received a school psych intern grant for just over $31,000 from ODE, miscellaneous state grants. There are additional carryover funds of a big whopping $30 that we are increasing for the IDEA, the preschool handicap program. And then there was a decrease in Title IIA, and this is how it was being accounted for from ODE. Instead of us processing it as an expense, it was actually coming out as a negative receipt, so we actually reduced the appropriation for that amount. So all totaled was $342,848.68. We have two fund-to-fund transfers. One is our annual transfer that we make from the general fund to the debt service fund, Special Cost Center 9015 for the 2014 stadium bleacher notes that we have. So that's $58,021.52. And then annually, we always earmark $275,000 to transfer from the general fund to the severance fund. We move those monies in there, and that's what's used to pay the severance payments for retirees that have earned those. We have one then and now on here where it's just an issue of an invoice coming in before the purchase order was there. So we're certifying that the funds were available then and now. Anything over $3,000 must come to the board for approval, so that's why that's there. This is always the best part of my report, is thanking everyone for the donations that they've given to the district. We've got a total donations of $2,408 you'll see here. It's a little smaller list, but that's the summer. That's kind of expected. So you'll see that there, and we thank everyone for their contributions and donations to the districts and our kids. The last item you have here, this is something that happens every August. Not exactly a big exciting report that folks want, but it is our commercial paper investment report, in case anybody wants to read it. It is a yeah, of course, I know you did. But this is just something to invest in commercial paper, which are short-term debt issuances by corporations. There is an extra level of training that I must go through in order to invest in those. And by doing so, there's a requirement for this report to be accepted by the board, and then we file this with the mandatory agencies that we need to send this to. So once this is accepted tonight, then I'll file that tomorrow, and we'll be in compliance with the reports. But it just goes through and shows you what all those investments were for last fiscal year. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Mr. Gooding. There are 6 items for action under letter G, financial business. Is there a motion to approve item G7, which is financial business items G1 through G6? Thank you, Ms.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Coates. Any additional discussion about any of these items? I know that we've already discussed a lot at Finance Committee on Tuesday, but anything additional? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Horn? Mr. Manley? Mrs. Piccolo-Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates? Motion carried.
Thank you. Now I am going to turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent, Mrs. Elliott.
Thank you, and congratulations. So I'm going to talk about a few things, starting first, just highlighting our 2 professional development days that we had to start the school year. As Joan mentioned, we did have a very organized safety training across the district. Two parts, actually. The first one is CRACE training, and it's a very, very important active assailant training. We were able to coordinate a schedule that allowed every group of staff to participate, from certified staff, classified staff, bus drivers attended, central office maintenance, food service staff. It was heavy and a lot to take in, but as Joan mentioned and Dr. Deagle has shared, a very important training that we'll continue to do work with over the course of the year. I'd like to thank Jennifer Korn for all of her work on putting that together and working with the local first responders. They were presenters, and so I know that's a new experience for them, presenting to educators. So we're just thankful for that collaborative effort. We also had training on a new standard response protocol. So, we're moving away from ALICE, which was run, hide, fight, and now it's avoid, deny, defend. And there are various protocols that we go into: hold, secure, lockdown, evacuate, and shelter. So it's training for everyone to be able to learn about the new language and also kind of reflect on their personal spaces, and just ways to be as prepared as we possibly can. We also had district-wide PBIS training. There was a lot of work that happened last year with our assistant principals, and Lisa Kelly led those efforts last year. Marvella jumped in and helped facilitate this year and pull that together, collaboration over the summer months, and just working toward the understanding of a reset for PBIS, rolling out expectations in all of the buildings, having consistent data tracking mechanisms. So that's also something we'll continue to be working on over the course of the year. And then wrapped up the first 2 days, depending on how each building's schedule went, with just normal welcome and logistic meetings at the building level. I also wanted to highlight, just note for everyone, that we are getting going with our enrollment study. We just got the contract today, actually, that we're taking a look at. We are looking to do both enrollment projections and student potential analysis. So we are going to be submitting data in very early September. It's about an 8 to 12 week process, so hoping to wrap that up by the middle of the year to have some updated enrollment information to share. A couple other big projects that we have going on: the high school bell schedule. I wanted to recap some of the information I had shared at the end of last year. There was a process that Mrs. Williams led. She has a steering committee of 20 staff members from the high school. There was a survey that went out, over 1,500 responses, pulled together some of the trends, and then she had focus group time to come together based on the feedback to kind of present 5 different schedule options to gather feedback on. And so they'll be getting back into those schedules, the feedback that was received, to kind of work through that process and soon, make sure that we can communicate what it's going to look like for 24-25. And then that piggybacks on our school start time project, which we'll be communicating here shortly with the community about the project, opening it up to anyone at any level that's interested in coming and being part of focus group conversations about, concerns or considerations that we need to be looking at. Discussing some of the research, having, the ultimate goal of just reevaluating our current structure, and also working hard to get our high school students a later start time, which is in support of the research. So we'll have those focus groups. We'll also be working with a vendor that will help us to look at some different options. We kind of provide all of the details, the parameters we have, and then they're able to help us pull together some great bell schedule options based on busing and transportation parameters and just various things that play into our day-to-day operations, athletics, clubs, things like that. The goal is to wrap that up mid-year. Also, we'll have a busy mid-year. So we want to give families enough time to prepare for the 24-25 school year, with any changes coming. And then I'll highlight just a few things on the agenda before you in my section, and then in human resources also. We have some special education contracts on the agenda before you. We have a couple items with our partner non-pub, St. Matthews. We are the fiscal agent for them. So one of the changes we made at the beginning, those are all funded with auxiliary funds. We have our non-addendum clubs to start the school year. All of the non-addendum items on the agenda tonight are items that you would have approved last year that are still in place. We will have more next month and then again in January. And then we have our preschool program of studies. Very similar to the preschool handbook. Very similar to the elementary handbooks with just some tweaks that are specific to the preschool level. So taking a look at some of the requirements from the state, highlighting the screening requirements, the medical examination requirements, the licensing requirements, taking a look at, it's got some tweaks for how attendances requirements are different at the preschool level, highlights our structure, our fees, and such. And then moving into the HR section, the Human Resources Department continues to be very busy. I would like to give a huge shout out to everyone that's been a part of the work. We are proud that we have all of our certified positions filled. We have one future vacancy that we know of, but all certified positions filled. They're still working on some of our classified positions. And then later down in the section, you'll see some of the regular things that we typically have on: additional hours for leadership team, assessment teams, trainings, IEP work, things like that. So several items to vote on in those two sections.
Thanks, Mrs. Elliott. I have two questions, but I'll wait until we get a motion on the floor. Is there a motion to approve? Let's see. Education pupil programs, service items, H10, which is items H2 through H9. Thanks, Mrs. Mooring. Is there a second?
Second.
Votes. And now I'm looking to see if my question has to do with this section. It does. So I remember, have we had a preschool handbook before, or is this, you're shaking your head? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We have had one before.
Did we just have it out of sync timing-wise with the others?
Yes, just out of sync.
Okay.
This is the first year we've board approved the handbooks.
Got it.
And so with preschool starting a little bit later, we put our emphasis on getting the school age going. Preschool's full day is next Thursday. So
Okay.
it just took us a little longer to get that wrapped up.
Okay.
But we have had them in the past.
Thank you. I do have one other question, but does anybody else have any questions about any of these items? Actually, my other question isn't about a voting item, but just for clarification, with the bell schedule and the high school start time. So the timing that I think I heard you just say is that there's a possibility that would be any 24, 25, not in 25, 26 when the new high school opens.
That is correct. The plan is for 24, 25, we'll get those implemented the year before the new high school opens.
Okay, thank you. Just had to have that straight in my mind. Any other questions about these items, or I guess any of the things that Mrs. Elliott just talked about? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring? Mrs. Coates? Mrs. Horn? Motion carried.
Then in the Human Resources section, letter I, Mrs. Elliott was right. They have been extremely busy. There are 53 items for action. So is there a motion to approve item number I-54, which is items I-2 through I-53? Am I counting wrong? Oh, so there are 52 items for action. Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Is there a motion to approve, I think it's still I-54, is that right?
It's
Or
what's showing on the screen is still,
Okay, so it's I-54, which is items I-2 through I-52. Thanks, Mrs. Horn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Mr. Manley. Any additional discussion or questions about any of those items? Go ahead, Mr. Manley.
Yeah, just briefly, just say thank you so much for all your work over the summer, and that goes for the superintendent too.
My thought would be similar in that to have all certified positions filled before the first day of school, and it sounds like they may even have been filled early enough that they got to take part in all of the back-to-school trainings and things. That's really awesome, and our HR department is amazing, and just very proud of them.
Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
I can, and since I have the mic, I just want to let you know what I'm going to do here on the screen, so it may
Okay.
affect your screens.
Okay.
So when Mr. Hetzel does his report, because we've made some amendments, I'm going to refresh the screen so that those new amendments will pop in, because the executive session does not show on your screen right yet, and it won't until I refresh mine. So if you see something funky on your screen it's going to happen, so that's okay. So, okay. Mrs. Pickle Antonio.
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring.
Yes.
Mrs. Coates. Mrs. Horn. Mr. Manley.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. I will turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Hetzel.
I too must congratulate you, President Pickle Antonio. We're very proud.
Item on our donations, which I think was a scholarship that we were able to obtain because of an award that you won, Mr. Hetzel. So thank you for that donation to our students.
Okay. Well, I think everybody is very excited about today, and there was a lot of anxiety this week heading into it because there was so much activity. And one of the areas that personally I think the operational side was sensitive to was parking and traffic logistics at the high school site and all of the ancillary sites associated with it. So I do want to thank Steve King, assistant principal at the high school. He did a fantastic job working with Jessica Williams to create really a numbering system that we were at the midnight hour able to apply to all of the parking spots so that they could issue assigned parking for everyone. We came in this morning, we have an MOU in place with certificate of coverage for Peace Lutheran. We have the same on Monday. Gahanna Community Congregational Church passed the approval for an MOU with them. We have them insured as well, and we are in the midst of working with the city on theirs, and all the while getting the lots cleaned up, sealed, and striped. So that went very well. Also, in coordinating some of the site logistics, we build a back loop a little bit earlier, I think, than what maybe would have been planned, so that we could have buses turn around on that site and pick up some of the students that we pick up on the, I think, the south side of the building. And I want to thank Phil from Rosilli for making all of that happen as we walk through that. We drove back around there this morning and everything was working very well. And we were able to get maybe 40 or so additional spots by retaining some of that tennis court area as well. And we're going to finish striping that this weekend. And so we feel comfortable with all of those things. And again, a little thing that's a big thing if it doesn't go right. So everybody was very cooperative and worked hard on that. Next up is all the stadium prep that's coming on September 1st. And I would tell everybody what's going to be happening on there, but I would spoil the surprise, so everybody's going to have to go there and watch the game and see what's going on. And then we have, general agenda items that I wanted to just kind of highlight for you. As Mrs. Mooring had said, we had our Finance and Facility Committee meeting on Tuesday. We discussed lots of aspects of our Phase 2 project, which includes contingency. And so you'll see that on there now, that we have passed the final bid approval for the high school project. So we're wanting to increase that contingency tonight so that we have the room to work with adjustments and unforeseen conditions we may face in building that high school. Also, you'll see on there Blue Technologies. Matt Blackwell and I worked on this for some time because our lease is coming due. We had options to renew our lease with our existing old equipment, buy the old equipment and negotiate a cost per copy price, or go to the market and look at 3 to 5 year options. And so we went through that process. We worked with different dealers, we worked with different manufacturers, and we settled on retaining our equipment and negotiating a new cost per copy price. And that's what you see on the agenda with Blue Technologies. And it actually, when we settle that out, we will purchase the equipment at market price. And so once we finish the contract, which is in September, they'll issue that price. And so that together is less than what we're paying right now. So from an operating perspective, so we were happy with that. And I really think because of COVID, hate to say it, but we didn't use the copiers for about 1.5 years, and I think that they're lasting a little bit longer, and we feel good about them. So we feel like that's going to take us a little bit farther. So you'll also see on there some vehicle items. Sue Wigging had in her budget earlier proposed to purchase some vehicles to transport students for their programming. You'll see an SUV that we're recommending. We went through state term pricing, multiple options and manufacturers there, and then the manufacturers have government incentive programs, and so we worked through all of those to get the best pricing we could on that, and that's below her budget item, so we feel really good about that. And we approved, we're amending the approval to purchase buses, because as we went to issue that, the dealer said, hey, we have a lift bus available, it's on the lot. And we thought those are difficult to get, they take about 1 year, and it's a 72 passenger bus, so we can use it for general transportation, but we can also use it for special needs. We like the flexibility of all of that. So we thought we would shift gears, and for a modest adjustment of roughly $10,000, we thought that would help our fleet a little bit better and give us more flexibility. So that's why that's on there. And then I think kind of in closing, Megan Sweller and the Food Service Department, Matt Blackwell, I'm going to say him by name, and the Tech Department, Krista Parkey in the Transportation Department, Dwayne Hawk and Brad Cleveland in Operations, supporting maintenance, grounds, and custodial, and all of our support staff and secretarial staff have worked just tirelessly all summer, nonstop, and especially the support staff, not just keeping projects in line, but us in line. It's been very, very helpful because we can wander off a little bit. So that's gone very well. And then in the spirit of efficiency as well, I wanted to go back. Krista Parkey and I talked at the beginning of the year. Dr. Deagle is really trying to emphasize efficiency. We agree. Sometimes it's hard to get there, but we set a goal to at least reduce 2 routes from what we had started last year. We were able to do that, so we have 2 less routes. And we also submitted a motor fuel tax refund claim this year that we're eligible for. We think we can get $29,500 back from the state. So the fuel has embedded taxes in it, and you have the opportunity to claim it. But if you don't say anything, you don't get it. So we decided to pursue that. So in all, it went really well today.
Thank you, Mr. Hetzel. There are 5 items for action under letter J. Is there a motion to approve items J2 through J5, which is item number J6?
Got a motion?
Thanks, Mr. Manley. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any discussion or questions about any of these items? Go ahead.
I just want to say thank you for your work as well during the summer. I really am excited to approve the vehicle purchases. It is it's an expense, but I know, the vans, we really needed them, and it's going to make a big difference to the families. The Lyft bus, huge difference to the families to have more options, comfort, safety. So I fully support that, and we'll save in the long run too, not to mention just the difference to our families and students. Thank you for that.
Any other questions, comments? Mrs. Horn and then Mrs. Coates.
Piggyback on what Dion was saying, I think for everybody, watching this meeting to go back and look at the finance meeting just to see the updates. There was a lot of work that went on in the district over the summer, and really only Middle School South, I think, was the only building that wasn't touched. And I know that's the one thing that I've heard a lot from the community is just astoundment of how much work transpired and just how great everything looks. And it takes a village, and you certainly had a lot of people working very, very hard, and we greatly appreciate everything that they've done. So thank you for that.
Mrs. Horn, Mrs. Coates.
And just wanted to confirm with the MOU for Shaw Park on here, that any student that was eligible for parking is going to receive parking for this school year. Is that correct?
That is my understanding.
Okay. So that's amazing and something we should celebrate. And not only do I want to thank our community partners, which Peace Lutheran was like the first on board, I believe, with their MOU, but also, again, to add on to the kudos, all the work that was done in those relationships and having the conversations. Thank you for that.
Mrs. Mooring.
Well, I want to make sure, if you don't watch Finance and Facilities, you wouldn't know that this first day back to school is the first day that every building has had secure entrances. And in today's climate, I will sleep so much better tonight, knowing that all of those got finished over the summer. I think it was 6, right? 5 plus Middle School East. It's a number thing. Come on, buddy. Yeah, 6 of them were accomplished in short order this summer. So I think as a district, we ought to be very happy and proud of the work that was done. And Cliff, I saw people working every day of the week when I drove by the schools that I passed by. So it was effort, and it is appreciated.
Very busy summer. Thank you to everybody. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Mooring? Yes. Mrs. Coates? Yes. Mrs. Horn? Yes. Mr. Manley? Yes. Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Motion carried.
So 2 of the items, including the Shoal Park MOU, are in this next section. So is there, Just a little, that's okay. Is there a motion to approve item K3, which is
So moved.
is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Horn. Any additional discussion about either of these items? So this is where the Shull Park MOU is. This is also where the bus routes are. Any questions or comments? So I guess just to Mrs. Coates's earlier point, there are still students that are currently on the waiting list for parking at the high school. Do we know right now when, I guess we know that we're voting on the MOU tonight. Do we know when the work will be parking lot?
This Saturday.
Okay, that's great.
9/1, that if we can get everything, if we can target the timeline, it's all dependent upon that. But we'll be prepared to go whenever Dr. Deagle says it's time to go.
Not so fast, let's wait. Yeah, students should wait until they hear from their administrator.
Yes, and along with hearing from their administrator that there is parking available, they will also, just like our students who are parking at our off-site locations at Peace Lutheran Church and at First Community, Gahanna, thank you, sorry, Gahanna Congregational Community Church. Those students received this year a letter that was signed both by Dr. Deagle and by Mrs. Williams outlining the district's expectations of them because we are providing parking in areas that are not under our control. We are grateful to our community partners for that. And I think that, hopefully that letter makes clear to students and families both what those expectations are. Okay, anything else before I have Mr. Gooding take the roll? Okay, Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley? Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Motion carried.
And then last on the agenda, is there a motion to go into executive session pursuant to revised code 12122G1 for the purpose of discussing the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, compensation of an employer official, or the investigation of charges or complaints? Thanks, Mrs. Coates. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Manley. Any discussion? For anybody who may be, I guess, here or watching the video, before I have Mr. Gooding take the roll, when we go into executive session, the board will go into a separate area. There's no one actually that we need other than the board for executive session this evening. So Mr. Gooding and I will work out how to make sure that the adjournment time and motions are all taken care of. We will be coming back into open public session after executive session, but the only board action that we will be taking is to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, so it is 7:36 p.m. We will take a short recess and then go into executive session. Thanks, everybody.